Anderson Silva is coming back. You know, after all that's happened with him, after the hellacious 2013 that he had, you know, losing his title, then the rematch with Weidman, and then the gruesome leg break, all that happened to him. I know some people thought that he was done after that fight, as in he was going to retire. I know some people kind of felt that, especially after the first Weidman fight, his demeanour and his attitude, he was kind of like not that enthusiastic about wanting to fight for the belt right away, and then he eventually did, and then we know how it happened. And then he was away and injured with that injury that he had for such a long time, and the severity of the break, while it wasn't as bad as we all first thought, it was bad enough for him to be out for an entire year. And there's been so much discussion about Anderson Silva, and he's not fought this year, but so much discussion about what's going to happen with him. Should he retire? Is he going to continue fighting? Is he going to have a retirement fight and then leave? Is he going to fight for the belt ever again? All of these things have been discussed, and I really want to address this because now we know that Anderson has signed to fight Nick Diaz, and obviously I did a video on that, and if you haven't seen it, check it. It's in my previous stash of videos. And we know that that fight's going to happen, and I know that people have got their different opinions about who's going to win. I know a lot of people favour Nick Diaz in this fight, and I know some people favour Anderson in this fight for varying reasons. But the question I want to pose, and it is linked to this fight, and I really want to ask this, and I want to know what people think, and I'll give you what I feel about this too, because I know that these things are subjective to an individual. I want to know what everybody who watches this video thinks. We've seen Anderson do a press conference. He looked happy, he looked full of energy, he looked bright, he was sociable, he was talking to everybody, and he said something in that press conference that was really interesting to me. And you know what it was? It was when Anderson did the interview and he started to talk about wanting to fight for the belt again. And I was very intrigued by that because I didn't think he hadn't talked about it prior to that point. But he was talking about fighting for the belt. He was talking about having a fight for the title, you know, after the Diaz comeback, which he, in his own words, has described will be a beautiful return. And it's a very intriguing return considering everything that's happened. And then Anderson, again, was talking about fighting for the belt. He even said that he was going to root for Vitor Belfort versus Weidman. Root for Belfort against Weidman. Now, the thing that interests me is after Weidman and Belfort happens, depending on whom the winner is, and I know everyone says Weidman, if Anderson beats Nick Diaz, not only does he fight for the belt, but here's a question I want to ask. Does Anderson Silva come back and win the belt? That's a very interesting story that could emerge in 2015. If Anderson Silva makes a comeback, is he going to be fighting for the UFC middleweight championship and eventually win it in a rematch, whether it's Weidman or Belfort? We know he can beat Belfort, we've seen that happen. But say Weidman beats Belfort and then we have a trilogy fight, Weidman and Anderson Silva. Is Anderson going to be in that kind of shape? Is Anderson going to be in that kind of shape mentally to come back and to beat a Chris Weidman after he's lost to him twice in both very devastating ways? Can Anderson return to the top and become the UFC middleweight champion? I want to know what people think about that. I'm really intrigued, especially now he's done this interview. It's just got my brain and my gears in my brain going a bit, and I want to ask people what they think. Now you want to know what I think? Here's what I think. Since Anderson has been away, let's go back. When Anderson signed to fight Chris Weidman, I actually felt that style-wise, Weidman was just an ugly matchup for him. Weidman was a big, strong wrestler who understood the jiu-jitsu game. He could do what Chael does and take him down, but he'd probably do a better job of covering up and defending submissions. He might even go for submissions on Anderson. I think he hits a lot harder, generates a lot more power than Chael does on the ground, as well as standing up clearly. I think that he's just a far more uglier matchup for Anderson than Chael is, and I just think that style just gives him problems. And even in the second fight, what people I think might overlook, despite the injury, is that again Anderson wasn't necessarily having his way with him. Now there's debates as to why that is. A lot of people say, you know, and Anderson has shown this, he kind of lets people throw things out there and like figures out their timing before he does what Anderson Silva does. But even in the clinch, he wasn't necessarily having his way with Weidman. He was having a harder time being able to move him around. His leg kicks were being checked. Anderson was having a much harder time with that. I think his takedown defense looked like it got a little bit better, but in the clinch, Weidman knocked him back down and got top position and started to hit him, and Weidman had clearly won the first round again. And you then look at how Weidman has looked since that Silva fight when he fought Lyoto Machida, and he looked really, really good. He cut Machida off. He did a more effective job of cutting off Machida than I think most fighters have actually ever done. He did a very, very good job. He looked very impressive. His stand-up's a little bit different. Obviously, he's a little bit more flat-footed, but he cut the cage off well and he kept up pace with Machida, who I think style-wise can be a very difficult fight for people. And looking at that, that makes me think that if they have a rematch, a third match, a trilogy fight, I could see Chris Weidman beating Anderson again, and he's got the edge psychologically, and that's the other aspect I want to ask, and that's always the aspect I'm very, very, very interested in. So say Diaz and Silva fight, what's Anderson's mental state really going to be? Because remember this, fighters do lie. Fighters don't say what they're really thinking a lot of the times. Fighters don't say where they're really hurt, how their leg's really doing, how their elbow's really doing, how this and that's really doing, because you never ever really want to give out weaknesses, physical weaknesses that can be capitalized on in a fight. And if Anderson's actually still having problems with it psychologically, do you think that Anderson is actually going to own up to that in press conferences with his opponents and potential opponents watching? I don't think so. But then on the other hand, maybe he has dealt with that psychological aspect. Maybe he has seen a sports psychologist or just dealt with it the way that he needs to, so it's not an issue. I know he's throwing kicks there in the gym, but what's it going to be like when he's fighting? And when you go back and you look through the history of the sport and you look through guys who've had injuries and come back from them, that psychological element does play a role in the way someone fights. I remember when Mirko Krokop had injured himself. He had a leg injury, or was it an ankle injury? He'd injured himself, basically, and it was to do with his knee. It was his knee injury, right? And when he came back from his knee injury, I noticed that he was very, very gun shy with throwing the kick. He wasn't trying to throw the kick with the same leg in the same way. He was a little bit more hesitant and a little bit more tentative when he was fighting, and I noticed that psychological element. He just looked a little bit more like, oh shit, my leg, you know. He had a bit more of that, and it looked like that in a lot of his fights. He was very, very gun shy when he was throwing those kicks. So obviously I think it played a factor into, you know, why Krokop wasn't able to be the Krokop that we all knew and loved, the guy that was knocking guys out with the left high kick and the right high kick. When he had that injury, if you watch his fights, he was not throwing those kicks in the same way. And is some of it physical or is some of it mental? We've seen a lot of these kind of cases in sports where when a guy's come back from a devastating injury, some guys come back, some guys come back, but they don't come back in the same way. And I wonder how much of an element that's going to be when Anderson Silva returns. Now, don't get this twisted. This is not a Anderson Silva's gonna fail. He's never gonna. Oh, he's gonna look awful. It's not. Oh, Anderson's gonna be horrible. It's not that video. It's not that video. It's me posing questions. So I hope no one takes what I'm saying the wrong way, and I hope I've done a good enough job of explaining it clearly to everybody. I think that the psychological aspect is going to play a factor into whether Anderson is going to come back. Now, can Anderson win the belt? If Belfort beats Weidman, I could see Anderson taking out Belfort. If he's dealt with the psychological aspect of it, then there's a possibility. When I look at the rest of the weight class at middleweight, there's some very good fights there for him. I don't think he'll ever fight Jacare. Him and Mousasi would be a great fight. Him and Luke Rockhold would be a great fight. Obviously, him and Weidman would be a trilogy fight, but I think Weidman's an ugly fight for him. There's a lot of fights for him at middleweight. And what about also what I've just heard this morning? George St. Pierre apparently has been seen talking to Dana White. Now, if that leads to anything, could we just see Anderson having fun fights? Maybe fighting George St. Pierre after Nick Diaz. Maybe he doesn't go for the belt, but then I'm contradicting myself because he has done an interview saying he wants to fight for the belt. I just want to know what people think, how they feel. Yes, get this clear, this is not a hater video on Anderson Silva. I like Anderson Silva. Granted, I find him a bit cocky, but I am happy to see him back. I don't want to see a man go out like that. You know, I don't wish that on anybody. That's horrible, except Adolf Hitler. But that's a different story. I don't wish to see someone go out like that. I do not wish to see someone go out like that. This is not a video where I am slating and slamming a man. It's a video where I'm asking a question and trying to answer it as best I can. Now I'm going to stop. I'm going to upload this. I want to know what everybody out there thinks. Can Anderson Silva come back? Can he be the Anderson Silva we all knew and loved? Can Anderson Silva come back and be the UFC middleweight champion? Will he have the biggest comeback of 2015? Or is Anderson going to come back very differently to what we know and how we've seen? Guys, I'm going to stop. If you haven't met me before, hello, hit the subscribe button. I need to go. See you later. Peace.